there was a recent quote from, you probably saw, Vice President J.D. Vance gave a quote where he was talking about essentially why we didn't really need to care that much about immigrants. And he talked about, he said, oh, there's a Christian concept of the ordo amoris. This is the hierarchy of the people you're supposed to love. And he said our first obligation is to love our fellow citizens, well, first our family, then our fellow citizens, and then we can care about the rest of the world later. Essentially, we don't have to love the rest of the world.
And I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
And as I heard that, you were actually the person I thought of, because you have been such an advocate for and a spokesperson for the deepest concept of Christian love, of brotherhood, of humanity. And I wonder if you could tell me your reaction when you hear that kind of Christian justification for essentially cruelty.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the worst kind of rationalization of indifference. And the great Rabbi Joshua Heschel used to say, indifference is the very essence of what sin is. A cold heart, a coarsened conscience, and a callousness toward the suffering of others, especially the most vulnerable, the orphans, the widows, the motherless, the fatherless, the oppressed, the subjugated, the demeaned, the degraded. There was a philosophical doctrine called self-referential altruism that was put forward about 45 years ago and the philosophers went at it tooth and nail because, of course, given the kind of narcissism, not just in Vance, but in all of us, we have to kill it every day. The great Goethe said you got to wake up and kill the worst inside of you in order to win what he called freedom and existence. And he's right about that. Of course, Christians talk about learning how to die every day. When Dorothy Day wrote a eulogy for Martin Luther King Jr., she said he learned how to die every day. What does that mean? That means to deal with the hatred and the envy and the greed and the resentment inside of each and every one of us in order to emerge with courage. And one of the distinctive features of the decline of the American empire, and it's a sad thing because we're watching it in real time, the decay, the decline, the dissolution, is the spiritual and the moral cowardliness, the civic cowardliness. And so we can talk about huge military, you can talk about how your economy's doing, but if your political system is not predicated on a civic virtue and a courage to reach out and be concerned about others, then the political system is a house of cards. I mean, James Madison understood that you can't proceed without civic virtue. We know that. John Adams said the same thing. These are not the most revolutionary thinkers around, but they got some insights, though, brother.
When you talk about waking up every day and killing the worst that's inside you, it strikes me that Donald Trump is someone who essentially flips that doctrine on its head and wakes up every day and celebrates the worst that is inside him and says, no, this is you should embrace it, you should lean into it, you should act upon all of your worst impulses, and you should do so unashamedly. You should never apologize. In fact, Vance reacted very, very negatively when someone suggested that this racist employee at the Department of Government Efficiency should be rehired, and they said, well, shouldn't he apologize first? And Vance suggested that even to apologize for a racist statement was a form of what he called emotional blackmail. It does strike me that the Trumpism, the White House recently posted for Valentine's Day a message, roses are red, violets are blue. If you're here illegally, we'll deport you. And they posted a video of someone being shackled for a deportation flight. It really does seem that this doctrine of killing, taking these worst impulses and destroying them, you could really go in the exact opposite direction. And now that is what seems to be in power in this country.
I think you're absolutely right, though, brother. I mean, you might recall that one of your epigraphs is from Thucydides. And Thucydides was a favorite writer of Nietzsche. And both of them put a premium on the centrality of war and strength and the relative feebleness of trying to create interruptions in the history of the species dominated by war, dominated by oppression, dominated by exploitation. And it's a very important juxtaposition because, see, somebody like Trump, I mean, you'd have to get partly into his own formation and so on. You know, he had a very, very precious mother from Scotland who made it here penniless. And then there's Mary Ann. And she used to tell Trump, she said, I just hope you don't grow up to be somebody that I'm ashamed of. I just hope you grow up to be somebody I can be proud of, not based on the money you have, but based on who you are. Now she's coming out of a working class situation in a highly, highly impoverished situation in Scotland as an immigrant, comes to the United States, and she meets Fred, Trump's father, but Trump has this element in his past that he continually pushes aside because Roy Cohn and a whole host of others, including his father, had socialized him into a might makes right view of the world. The 10 commandments mean nothing. The 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught, is the only important one.
Yeah, right. Right.
Life is a matter of a survival of the slickest and the richest and the smartest. Now, he's not all alone. America in general, and not just American empires in general. There's been 70 empires in the history of the species. The United States is 68th empire in the history of the species. You know that. But the United States is unique because it denies it's an empire.
Yes, right.
And therefore you can't understand the truth. That's what the myth of American idealism.
That's right.
And how U.S. foreign policy endangers the world. You deny you're an empire. You deny the very power that you exert and the violence that you promote in the name of what? Innocence. James Baldwin said what? That innocence itself is a crime. And so Trump is a manifestation of the worst of the U.S. empire, but he's had elements inside of him that he has thoroughly ignored, and he ends up choosing to be a gangster. Now, a gangster is different than a hypocrite. Hypocrisy is the tribute that vice plays to virtue, right? Yes. Hypocrites have standards, they just violate them. Gangsters have no standards. They say anything, do anything, think they can get away with it. No accountability, no answerability, no responsibility. That's the history of Trump. That's also the history of the U.S. empire in terms of its attempt to shape the world in its own image and interest. So then here comes those prophetic ones. I was so glad you invoked Melville, brother, in white jacket.
Oh, it's true, yeah.
Oh, yes, indeed. Because what does Melville say in Moby Dick? America, you are addicted to self-destruction. And if you don't learn how to muster the courage to think critically and to love and be concerned about the least of these, just like the Pequod, the ship in that powerful epic, the epic that he wrote at 32 years old, you're going under. And how does it end? Ishmael's on top of what? A coffin. The ship goes under. That self-destruction overwhelms the moral and spiritual forces. But those of us who are committed to the moral and spiritual forces will hold on. Now, you know, and I know, see, I come from a people, brother, who've been on intimate relations with catastrophe, calamity, monstrosity, 244 years of the most barbaric slavery of modern times, and then another 100 years of neo-slavery of Jim and Jane Crow. They lynching black folk every 2.5 days for 50 years. How do we generate some courage to love, courage to hope, courage to resist, courage to remember, courage to have a reverence for something bigger than our egos? Moral and spiritual cultivation. How do you cultivate? By example, not by textbook. No, not by words on paper. There's some beautiful words on paper in the U.S. Constitution. It was pro-slavery in practice. We're talking about actual examples, practices. That's the key thing, though, brother.
Thanks for watching. This video is a product of Current Affairs Magazine, the country's leading independent left print magazine based here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Go to currentaffairs.org. to find out more about us at currentaffairs.org/subscribe to subscribe to our absolutely gorgeous bi-monthly print edition. Get it in your mailbox. You can also subscribe to the Current Affairs News Briefing, the Current Affairs Podcast, or you can subscribe to our digital edition. Current Affairs is entirely reader-supported. We have no ads. We have no corporate backers. We depend on you. So please consider purchasing a subscription or making a donation to Current Affairs today. We are a 501c3 non-profit organization, and your donations are tax-deductible to the extent allowable by law. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.